when a white police officer pulled over a black man in a luxury car. Assuming the worst, he was ready to flex his authority, but within minutes, he realized he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, because the man he was trying to intimidate held more power than he could imagine, and what happened next turned his world upside down. The sun beat down on the quiet road just outside of Millstone, a sleepy town nestled in the deep south. Officer Chad Rollins was cruising along Highway 9 in his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee and half listening to country music humming on the radio. It had been an uneventful shift, the kind he liked. Boring was safe. But then, a sleek black Mercedes sedan appeared in his rearview mirror, gliding smoothly into town. Rollins straightened in his seat. Luxury vehicles weren't rare in Millstone, but a black man behind the wheel of one, well, that was unusual, at least in his narrow view of the world. He watched the car closely. No traffic violations, no speeding, no illegal lane changes. Still, his fingers tapped the steering wheel. Itching, suspicion, born not from evidence but from deep, unchecked bias, crept up his spine. Without hesitation, he flicked on his lights and sirens and pulled out behind the Mercedes. The car came to a gentle stop on the shoulder. Inside, Judge Marcus L. Bennett remained calm. He'd been through this dance before too many times for a man of his stature. As a federal judge, he had presided over some of the most important civil rights cases in the region. Yet, no matter his accomplishments, to men like Officer Rollins, he was just another black man in a car that looked too expensive. He reached into his glove compartment and retrieved his registration, then pulled out his wallet, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Through the rearview mirror, he watched the officer approach with heavy boots and an even heavier attitude. Rollins reached the window and leaned down, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the judge's calm expression. "License and registration," he said with unnecessary sharpness. "And tell me, what brings you to Millstone?" Marcus handed him the documents without a word, choosing instead to meet the officer's tone with silence. Rollins frowned. "You live around here," he pressed. "I have the right to travel freely," Marcus replied in a measured tone. "I'd like to know why I'm being stopped." That only irritated Rollins further. He didn't have a real reason, and now this man was challenging his authority. "You were going a bit fast back there." Rollins lied, avoiding eye contact as he scanned the documents. Everything was valid. Clean record, no warrants. But Rollins wasn't ready to let it go. "Step out of the vehicle," he demanded. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Am I being detained?" "Step out now, sir, or I will consider it non-" Reluctantly, Marcus opened the door and stepped out, standing tall and dignified in his tailored suit. Rollins gestured for him to walk to the front of the car. "Hands where I can see them," he barked, drawing attention from passing drivers. The indignity of the situation wasn't new to Marcus. Even after decades in the justice system, he knew his skin color could still spark a confrontation. But today felt different. Not because he feared for his life, but because he was tired. Tired of pretending his badge gave him immunity. Tired of officers like Rollins who abuse power without consequence. The officer reached for his cuffs, but before he could make a move, Marcus spoke calmly. "Before you go any further, you might want to take a look at this." He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather badge wallet, opening it with practiced ease. Rollins glanced at it, and the color drained from his face. He froze. "Federal Judge Marcus L. Bennett," the judge said quietly. "Now, would you like to continue this stop, Officer Rollins?" Hands trembled slightly as he stepped back. His mouth opened, but no words came out. A dashcam blinked silently behind him, recording every moment. Marcus tucked his badge back into his coat and said, "You still haven't answered my question. Why did you stop me?" Rollins said nothing, and in that silence, Marcus knew this was far from over. Officer Chad Rollins stood frozen beside the Mercedes, staring at the federal badge as if it were a ghost. His pulse pounded in his ears, and for the first time in years, he felt something stronger than a fear. His arrogance drained from his face, replaced by uncertainty. The man he had just humiliated by the roadside, the one he nearly handcuffed without cause, wasn't just another driver passing through. He was a federal judge, a powerful one. And now Rollins' every move, every word, every threat, was caught on dashcam footage that was surely going to be reviewed, maybe even aired on national news. He took a small step back and awkwardly tried to recover his stance. "I didn't realize who you were, sir," he said, voice lower now, nearly submissive. "Just doing my job, that's all." Judge Marcus Bennett narrowed his eyes, still calm but with a subtle sharpness beneath his gaze. "Doing your job," he repeated softly, as if testing the words. "Interesting. Because from what I recall, your job does not include falsifying reasons for traffic stops, forcing innocent citizens out of their vehicles, or threatening arrest without probable cause." His voice wasn't raised, but it cut deeper than any shout. "What were you expecting to find? Drugs, weapons, or just a reason to remind a black man that this town isn't his?" Rollins flushed. "No, sir, it's not like that. I didn't mean any disrespect," but his stuttering apology felt hollow, even to himself. Marcus folded his arms and looked around. A few more cars had slowed to pass by, their drivers watching the scene unfold with curiosity. He could feel the weight of their eyes, but he didn't flinch. "You see," Marcus continued, his voice smooth and resolute, "this is the very problem I've ruled on from the bench for years. Officers abusing their authority because they think they won't be held accountable. You're not the first to make this mistake, but maybe you'll be the last, at least around here." Rollins tried to salvage the situation. "If there's anything I can do," he began, but Marcus raised a hand to silence him. "You've done enough," he said. "Now I suggest you call your supervisor immediately." Rollins hesitated for a breath, then reluctantly reached for his radio. As he turned away to speak in low tones to his sergeant, Marcus pulled out his phone and began documenting the scene. Not for vengeance, for evidence, for justice, for the countless others who never had a badge to shield them when the lights flashed behind their car 15 minutes later. A marked SUV pulled up. Sergeant Karen Whitaker stepped out, a stocky, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s who'd been with the force longer than Rollins had been out of school. She walked over, eyes scanning Marcus's car, then landing on the judge himself. "Your Honor," she said with genuine respect, extending her hand. Marcus shook it firmly. "Sergeant," he replied, "we have a serious issue here." Whitaker looked at Rollins, who avoided her gaze, his face stiff. "I've heard, and I assure you, it will be dealt with." Marcus nodded. "It's bigger than one man," he said. This moment, it's a symptom. There's a sickness in your department, and I won't walk away quietly." Whitaker didn't argue. "I understand. Sir, I'll begin an internal review immediately." Marcus offered a tight smile. "I'll be submitting a formal complaint to the DOJ as well. Transparency and accountability must start now." As Rollins stood to the side, the weight of what had just happened hit him in full. He hadn't just pulled over the wrong man, he had exposed himself and possibly his entire department to a storm that would soon be impossible to contain. Judge Bennett returned to his car, adjusted his suit, and drove off without another word. But his silence carried more power than any outburst. For Officer Rollins, the regret had only just begun. By the next morning, Millstone was no longer the quiet, overlooked town it had always been. The story of Officer Chad Rollins pulling over Judge Marcus L. Bennett had spread like wildfire. Local news stations ran with the headline, "Federal Judge Profiled During Traffic Stop in Millstone." By noon, the dashcam footage submitted anonymously was circulating on social media. The video was damning. It showed the aggressive tone, the forced commands, the lack of cause for the stop. And the moment Judge Bennett calmly revealed his identity, comments flooded in, some furious, some shocked, many heartbreakingly familiar. This wasn't just about one officer and one judge. It was about a system, and everyone could see it at the police department. Panic set in. The chief held a closed-door meeting with senior officers, while PR teams scrambled to craft statements that wouldn't worsen the damage. Officer Rollins had already been placed on administrative leave, but that wasn't enough to slow the outrage. Protesters began to gather outside City Hall by afternoon, holding signs that read, "Driving while black is not a crime, and we stand with Judge Bennett." Community leaders demanded accountability. National civil rights groups called for a federal investigation. The town had never seen this level of attention or unrest. Judge Bennett, meanwhile, remained poised and focused. He had not gone to the press, nor had he posted anything on social media, but he knew the moment was bigger than him, and he would not retreat into silence. That afternoon, he received a call from the governor's office offering a private apology and a promise to look into the matter. Bennett listened politely but firmly. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about every black driver who's been pulled over for no reason and didn't have a badge to protect them. Apologies are easy. Change is hard. And I intend to see change." Within days, the Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into Millstone's police department. Federal agents were dispatched to conduct interviews, audit body cam footage, and review past complaints that had long been buried. It didn't take long to uncover a pattern. Dozens of similar stops involving black and Hispanic drivers, many with no citations issued or charges filed. Officer Rollins' record revealed a troubling number of those stops. Worse, some of his reports were filled with vague justifications and conflicting details. The system had shielded him for years, but that shield was cracking fast. Inside the department, tensions rose. Some officers blamed Rollins for bringing heat to the whole force. Others quietly admitted they had seen the behavior before but never reported it, either out of fear or loyalty. Sergeant Whitaker, to her credit, cooperated fully with federal investigators. She had served long enough to know when a storm was too big to deny. "This department needs to be rebuilt from the ground up," she told the press in a rare statement. "We failed, and now we must do better." Meanwhile, Judge Bennett met with city officials and local activists. He didn't seek revenge. He wanted reform. "The goal isn't punishment," he said during one televised town hall. "It's prevention. I don't want future officers to make the same mistake, and I don't want future citizens to fear the people meant to protect them." But not everyone in town agreed. A small but vocal group began pushing back, claiming the incident was being blown out of proportion. They defended Rollins, called Bennett, a political opportunist, and warned that federal oversight would ruin the town. Bennett didn't respond to the noise. He had spent his life listening to cases, passing through truth and lies. He knew which voices mattered, which would fade. The truth was already out. The reckoning had begun, and Millstone would never be the same. The days turned into weeks, and Millstone found itself caught between two worlds, its past and its reckoning. Tensions simmered just beneath the surface. Some businesses closed early out of caution. The police department became a fortress of unease, where every officer now wore their badge with a little less pride, uncertain if the person beside them might be next to fall. And through it all, Judge Marcus L. Bennett moved quietly, speaking when it mattered, listening when others needed to be heard, and becoming a symbol of unshaken dignity in a town struggling to face its reflection. In the heart of town, the divide was growing visible. Some residents, especially those from the Black and Latino communities, stood behind Judge Bennett with fierce loyalty. They organized peaceful rallies, held prayer vigils, and packed town hall meetings, sharing their own experiences with racial profiling, stops without cause, and disrespectful treatment from officers. For the first time, these stories weren't dismissed. They were documented, recorded, and submitted as evidence in the DOJ's widening investigation. One by one, people came forward: teachers, nurses, business owners, even teenagers, speaking of fear and humiliation that had long been ignored. "He stopped me for a broken taillight," one woman said through tears. "But my taillight wasn't broken. He just needed a reason." On the other side, a defensive wall was forming. A group of longtime residents, many of whom had never experienced or acknowledged systemic injustice, rallied around Officer Rollins. They held up signs that read, "Support our cops and don't let the media control our town." They painted Rollins as a scapegoat, a victim of political correctness, and insisted his actions were standard procedure. Fueled by fear and pride, their gatherings became louder, angrier. The town was no longer just debating one incident, was confronting everything it had swept under the rug for generations. Judge Bennett never once engaged in the shouting. Instead, he took to the courtroom, his sanctuary, and requested a temporary reassignment from the bench to work directly with the Department of Justice task force overseeing police reform in Millstone. It was an unusual move, but one approved swiftly. His legal expertise and first-hand experience made him a vital bridge between the federal team and the community. Some accused him of overreaching, of using his position for attention, but he ignored them. He wasn't chasing cameras. He was chasing justice. Inside the police department, reforms were already underway. Officers now attended mandatory training on racial bias and de-escalation. Body cameras were enforced with strict compliance. A citizen oversight board was being formed, but for many it wasn't enough. They wanted to see real consequences. They wanted Rollins held accountable. Still on unpaid leave, Rollins stayed out of the public eye. Rumors swirled: he might resign, he might sue the department, he might flee the state altogether. But he did none of those things. Instead, he waited, hoping the noise would die down. But Marcus Bennett knew the noise was just beginning. At the next town hall meeting, he stood before a crowd of hundreds, some supportive, others glaring with folded arms. "We cannot fix what we refuse to admit is broken," he said clearly. "In this town, this country has been broken for far too long, for far too many. This is not about hatred of the police. This is about demanding better from those we trust with power." Some clapped, others walked out, but no one ignored him. The battle lines had been drawn not with violence but with truth. Not everyone was ready to cross over, but the judge's words echoed beyond the walls of that meeting hall, and deep down, even those who resisted knew the old Millstone was gone. A new chapter was being written, one hard conversation at a time. 3 months after the incident that had rocked Millstone, the town stood on the edge of transformation. The investigation by the Department of Justice was complete. Their final report, stretching hundreds of pages, confirmed what many already knew in their hearts. Millstone's police department had a pattern of racially biased policing, with Officer Chad Rollins named in dozens of documented cases. The report didn't just expose one man, it exposed a culture. One built on unchecked power, silence, and fear. And as the findings went public, Millstone was forced to reckon not just with a single bad stop, but with the truth it had tried to ignore for years at the same time. Judge Marcus Bennett had become a reluctant symbol of justice, not because he sought it, but because he lived it. His refusal to remain silent had stirred something powerful in the community. Schools began inviting him to speak to students about the Constitution and equality. Faith leaders quoted him from their pulpits. Even those who had initially doubted him began to listen. He didn't speak with anger, but with clarity. He reminded people that justice was not revenge, it was responsibility. That progress was not a sprint but a march. And that silence was not peace, it was complicity. Meanwhile, Officer Rollins had been officially dismissed from the force. The decision was announced quietly, with a short statement from the police chief. Millstone must hold itself to a higher standard. Rollins left town soon after, his reputation in ruins, but his departure marked only a small step in a much larger journey. His name would be remembered not as a scapegoat, but as a warning. And though some still defended him, Their voices grew smaller, less certain. The tide had turned. Change was beginning to take root. A new police chief was appointed, an outsider, known for transparency and reform. Community policing initiatives were introduced. Officers began walking neighborhoods again, not just patrolling from behind glass. A civilian review board, led by residents from all walks of life, was granted the authority to review complaints and oversee disciplinary action. Town halls became regular, not just reactions to crisis. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fast, but it was real. Judge Bennett, though, had reached a quiet crossroads. He returned to the bench, but with a changed heart. The courtroom felt different now. Every case, every defendant, every officer who took the stand, he viewed them through a sharper lens. He had lived the injustice he so often ruled against, and that made him not just more cautious, but more committed. On a crisp autumn morning, he delivered a powerful speech during Millstone's Unity Day, a new event created to honor the progress the town had made and to remind them of the work still ahead. Standing beneath the courthouse steps, with children, elders, officers, and activists all listening, he said, "Justice is not a destination, it's a journey we take together. We must keep walking, even when the road is uncomfortable, even when it forces us to confront truths we wish weren't real, because silence may keep the peace, but truth creates it." As he finished, the crowd rose in applause, not loud and rowdy, but strong and steady. It wasn't just a celebration of a man. It was a moment of collective reckoning, of hard-won hope. That evening, Judge Bennett walked alone through the same street where he'd been stopped months before. The town looked the same, but it felt different. A mural had been painted on a nearby building, 3 words in bold colors: dignity, justice, change. He paused, took it in, and smiled, not with pride, but with purpose. The road ahead was still long, but Millstone had finally taken its first honest step, and that made all the difference. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to The Black Struggle for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard.